being gay. That's extremely fringe, even among the right. We've then also seen the situation fueling anger and frustration at some media outlets for how they tackled the issue. Right? For example, you had the New York Post initially saying that the shooting was because of an argument between Joss and his neighbor, which led to takes like a big fuck you to the New York Post for reducing this murder to an argument with a neighbor, saying Jonathan Joss was the victim of a hate crime and died protecting his husband. Queer people shouldn't be killed for who they love/who they are. We deserve the right to exist. Also, as far as the Post, they've since released new articles that explicitly mention that Tristan claims it was a hate crime and the police deny that. Generally the most common response to all this has just been sympathy and sadness at just how pointless the killing was, regardless of the reason. With, for example, Nick Offerman, who had roles alongside Joss, writing in a statement, "The cast has been texting together about it all day and we're just heartbroken. Jonathan was such a sweet guy and we loved having him as our chief Ken Hotate." Terrible tragedy. Right? And with that, I think it's important to remember at the very least, whether it was because Joss was gay or having a particularly hard mental day after seeing his burned down home and dead dog, neither are an excuse for murder. But ultimately, that is where we are with this just horrible situation right now. And as we wait to see if any more information or evidence comes out, I'd love to know your thoughts on this, both with the situation at hand as well as the reactions. But then, from there, shifting gears from that, Pedro Pascal, Ariana Grande, and Sabrina Carpenter are fighting back against the Trump administration's efforts to cut funding to LGBTQ plus suicide prevention, with the Seeing the Trevor Project publishing an open letter signed by around 100 big names addressing the fact that the government is reportedly considering defunding LGBTQ plus services from the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Because while anyone in crisis can call 988 in the US, the line has counselors especially trained for high-risk groups like LGBTQ plus youth. And that, as you see things like last year, around 40% of young people in that community considered suicide and 1 in 10 had an attempt. And so we had this new celebrity-backed letter saying, since its launch in 2022, this program has connected nearly 1.3 million crisis contacts with life-saving affirming care to LGBTQ plus young people during their most vulnerable moments. And saying, this is about people, not politics. At a time of deep division, let this be something we as people can all agree on. No young person should be left without help in their darkest moment. Stripping away this lifeline leaves LGBTQ plus youth with the message that their lives are not worth saving. We refuse to accept that message. We call on the administration and Congress to do the right thing. Restore and protect funding for the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline's LGBTQ plus youth specialized services in the fiscal year 2026 budget. With a letter also addressing young LGBTQ plus people specifically and telling them that they are not alone and that people are fighting for them. And then as far as the general public, they encourage those interested to sign a petition to protect these lifeline programs. So you have many wondering if anything will actually be done because this is not happening in a bubble. Or the Trump administration has canceled grants aimed at researching and funding LGBTQ plus health initiatives. You then also have Trump's anti-DEI orders and rhetoric that have heavily targeted the community. Right, and all of this is playing out as Pride Month has kicked off, and you have many arguing that it feels like there's been a massive cultural shift. And one of the ways that you have people saying that we're seeing that is tons of corporate sponsors backing out of supporting Pride events, which, as it turns out, among other things, has caused budget shortfalls in cities all around the country. San Francisco Pride, for example, lost 5 major corporate backers, including Comcast, Smirnoff, and more. The city's organizers now facing a $200,000 budget gap. You're also seeing in Kansas City, they're down the same amount, which is roughly half of KC Pride's whole budget. You've also got the group behind New York City's Pride festivities trying to fill a $750,000 gap. And in St. Louis, after Anheuser-Busch ended its Pride sponsorship, organizers are down $150K. And then with all this, you have Suzanne Ford, the executive director of San Francisco Pride, telling the AP, with everything we're facing from the Trump administration, to lose 5 of your partners within a couple of weeks, it felt like we're being abandoned. Right? And then, reportedly after corporate withdrawals from Pride made headlines, you had some companies opting to donate, but apparently only doing so anonymously. And so with that, you have places like AP reporting that the shift reflects how corporations are adjusting to a changing cultural landscape that began during the pandemic and accelerated with Trump's second term. And then also with this situation, you have people kind of focusing on World Pride, which is being held in Washington, D.C. this year, with then tons of reports noting that people have kind of pretty complicated feelings on this for obvious reasons that you'd assume. For example, the founder and CEO of the travel platform Everywhere telling CBS News, what is happening socially and politically changes the feeling of the Pride that you are attending, and World Pride will likely bring an astronomical amount of fear and sadness from people. Because while some, they see this current administration and they feel more motivated to attend Pride, to stick it to the Trump administration, you have others scared to attend in this political climate. And actually with that, you do have some cities acknowledging the political elephant in the room. Like San Francisco's Pride theme is queer joy as resistance, New York's is rise up, pride and protest. And you had Suzanne Ford adding, if you come to Pride this year, that's a revolutionary act. You are sending a message to those in Washington that here in San Francisco, we still have the same values that we've always had. You can love who you love here. We're not going to retreat from that. And then we have a lot more news that we need to talk about today. But first, I gotta say, have you ever tried to stay dry in the city and you failed miserably? If you're over the fails, get with Vessi. Their weekend sneakers are 100% waterproof, but they still look like amazing shoes. No more soggy socks, no more awkward shoe changes, no more should I bring backup shoes panic. Their weekend sneaker is lightweight and breathable thanks to today's sponsor, Vessi's Dymatech Tech. They're super convenient. You just slip them on in seconds and you're ready to hit the subway, run errands, walk the dog, or grab coffee with friends if you have some of those. And these sneakers, they can handle city sidewalks, rainy crosswalks, and random puddles like a champ. They're stylish enough for work casual, but tough enough to take on whatever the weather throws at you. Plus, something I love is that they come in half sizes, which is clutch if your feet aren't perfectly average. I put miles on my sneakers and they're still going strong. So hey, scan that QR code or go to vessi.com/DeFranco for 15% off your first pair. The discount's applied automatically. And with a 1-year warranty and worry-free 30-day returns, you're covered for every journey. But then, jumping back into the news, so this is Dimitrik Deshawn Scott, and he's been charged with armed robbery and aggravated battery of another guy by the name of Ramon Morales Reyes in Milwaukee. With Morales Reyes claiming that Scott knocked him off his bike, cut him with a box cutter, and then stole the bike. But last week, Morales Reyes had made national headlines when Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem announced that he had been arrested for writing letters threatening to kill President Trump, with Noem describing him as an illegal alien who threatened to assassinate President Trump and claiming that he had entered the U.S. illegally at least 9 times and had a criminal record. In the announcement, Noem also included a picture of one of the letters where the author had written, "You have been deporting my family, and I think it is time Donald J. Trump get what he has coming to him," with him adding that he would self-deport himself after using his gun to shoot Trump in the head. With then legal documents also revealing that the letters, which were sent to the Wisconsin Attorney General's office, the Milwaukee police chiefs, and ICE, had a return address with his name. And so, unsurprisingly, that story gets a ton of traction with Noem and Trump supporters touting it as a success of Trump's immigration crackdown. But now, it turns out that Morales Reyes likely didn't write those letters, and the plot twist is that it was actually Scott. In a new complaint, you have prosecutors alleging that Scott wrote the letters pretending to be Morales Reyes in order to get him deported so he couldn't testify against him in the criminal robbery and battery case. And currently, it looks like the evidence is actually pretty damn strong. First of all, you had Milwaukee police saying that when they interviewed Morales Reyes, they found that he, quote, does not read, write, or fluently speak English, adding that a note from him that they had analyzed also showed completely different handwriting than the letters. And you had prosecutors saying that police listened to phone calls Scott had made from jail, including ones where he talked about sending letters, asked for the address of the Wisconsin AG's office, and repeatedly talked about how he had a plan that was going to get his case dismissed, with him even explicitly saying on one call, "This dude is a goddamn illegal immigrant and they just need to pick his ass up. If he gets picked up by ICE, there won't be a jury trial, so they will probably dismiss it that day. That's my plan." And then, here's the real kicker, the complaint literally says that during an interview with police on May 30th, Scott admitted that he wrote everything on the letters, and adding that he, quote, admitted that his intention was not to go after President Trump, but solely to prevent Morales Reyes from testifying at his trial. And so now, in addition to other charges against him, prosecutors have filed new charges of identity theft, bail jumping, and felony intimidation of a witness in a criminal complaint, with Scott's trial scheduled for July. But then as far as Morales Reyes, when asked if he still faces deportation given this wild development, you had a DHS spokesperson saying in a statement, "The investigation into the threat is ongoing," and adding, "Over the course of the investigation, this individual was determined to be in the country illegally and that he had a criminal record. He will remain in custody." Though you then also had his deportation defense lawyer telling reporters that he is working to get Morales Reyes released from custody and pursue any relief he may qualify for in immigration court. And so we'll see what happens there soon, but just a wild, wild piece of news. But then, next up from that, did Donald Trump's new acting head of FEMA genuinely just learn that hurricane season is a thing? That, tragically, is a very real question that's being debated by lawmakers right now. To just give you a little background here in case you're not up to date on FEMA, I don't know why you would be. Early last month, Trump appointed David Richardson as the acting administrator of the emergency department after firing the previous leader who Trump himself had literally appointed just months earlier. With that guy appearing to get the boot because he had the audacity to tell Congress that he thought that it might be a bad idea to eliminate FEMA entirely, which of course notably has been a Trump goal for a while, though notably it's been reported that Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, whose agency oversees FEMA, has quietly taken steps to keep the agency running because there's no alternative to replace it. Because as it turns out, you kind of fucking need FEMA. But that reality, it hasn't stopped the administration from trying to overhaul the agency and undermine it at every step of the way. And that including by appointing Richardson, who served in the Marines and worked in the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office of the DHS, but who lacks experience in emergency management. A fact that has raised concerns among FEMA staff, though, like many of Trump's appointees, the main qualification for any of the jobs is be a loyalist. Or what Daddy says goes, and you had him telling telling staff on his first full day in office that he will run right over anyone who resisted his changes. And then yesterday, those concerns were underscored during a staff briefing where he reportedly noted that June 1st was the start of hurricane season, which runs through the end of November, and then said, quote, "I didn't realize it was a season." And according to Reuters, it was not clear to staff whether he meant it literally as a joke or in some other context. And this is at the same time you had CBS reporting that current and former employees told them that the remark flustered many who genuinely believe Richardson was truly surprised to learn that Hurricane